How are we doing today, guys? So today we're going to be talking about pistol or single leg squat. How we're going to go through this is that we're going to go through different variations to build yourself up to a full body weight pistol. But on top of that, we're also going to be talking about the mechanics behind how you want to be moving and how you want to be developing the action itself. So we're going to go through that first, then we're going to be talking about the variations through that. So this is going to be a cueing of the actual movement first primarily, and then we'll go through the variations of how to get there. So when we're talking about a pistol, where a lot of people get caught is they get caught by inability to lift their leg up or inability to keep their weight balanced over their foot. Now, quite often what happens is that when they come down, they wind up having a big heel lift at the bottom of the rep, which obviously adds to instability. Whereas what we want to be thinking about when we're doing this is keeping the weight balanced over the top of the foot, which actually makes it significantly easier to lift that leg up. So, what we want to be thinking about is developing an understanding of how to keep the heel down, which is going to be about center of mass management, which is what we've spoken a lot more about in our squat videos and things like that, as well as developing range of motion in the correct joints at the correct time. So when I come down in a pistol squat, what I'm looking for is to create dorsiflexion through the ankle in terms of the knee traveling forwards. I'm looking to create flexion through the hip, which is going to allow me to shift my weight backwards, and that's going to create that balance. From there, I'm looking to create, keep the ribs stacked over the center of the foot, as well as allowing me to lift the other leg up. Now, there are strength components to lifting the leg up, which are related to obviously abdominal and hip flexor strength. I'm quickly going to talk about the variation of movement on that. So easy way to strengthen that up is honestly get yourself used to doing the gymnastics L-sit lifts or compression lifts. So sitting forwards and deliberately sitting slightly forwards, deliberately pressing into the ground. From there, point the toe, squeeze the quad and lift. And you want to be able to get strong at being able to hold that shape up. Now, notice when I did that, I didn't lean back. So a really good way is to force yourself into the wall. But as I lift up, I press into the floor. So for cueing this, sit the hips on the ground, deliberately tuck under, deliberately flex forwards, deliberately press those fingertips into the ground to create a little bit of pressure. Then from there, squeeze the quad, point the toe, and lift. Now, notice how I'm not leaning backwards there. So what a lot of people will do is they'll do this and they're not actually lifting through the leg. This will actually teach you to utilize your hip flexors and your abdominals and your quadriceps to create that hip flexion. Not so much the quadriceps. The quads are obviously just locking the knee out. They have no action on the hip other than the rect femoris, which is obviously a hip flexor. But we want to be able to utilize all of them to create that lift and create that upwards drive. Learning how to do this and being strong in that position will dramatically help your ability to understand where that straight leg needs to be, but it'll also make it a lot more comfortable and stop cramping in the quad itself. So now that we've covered that, next thing that we want to be thinking about is maintaining your center of mass. Now, when people pistol, they'll typically either fall backwards or fall forwards. Fall forwards, heel lift. If you're someone who's always coming down and you're coming down to that pistol and you're always having that big heel lift at the bottom of the rep, and you're really struggling with that, particularly if you've got lifters on and you're still lifting the heel, that just should not happen, period. I don't care how immobile the ankle is. People should be able to do that. That's just a case of, that's lack of center of mass management. And that's typically where a lot of this comes from, is understanding where the body is in space. So if you've shifted a lot of your mass, aka the other leg, plus your torso, plus you're starting in a position where your weight is already on your toe, where you run out of dorsiflexion really quickly, then of course you're going to come down and you're going to be on that toe all the way through the movement. What we want to be able to do is to shift that weight backwards. In this case, flex the spine, literally flex. And again, we don't need to actually maintaining sort of neutrality through the spine here. The spine's okay to move, particularly when it's not under load. We don't have a weight sitting on our back like a big back squat or anything like that. So the spine moving is fine, it's good, we want it, that's okay. we want to be able to let things shift, and allows us to control our center of mass over the ground. Because the reality of the matter is there aren't that many people who are going to stay perfectly straight spined in the bottom of the pistol. And you probably need to have the correct bone lengths to be able to do that in an effective way. If you don't have those correct ratios between shin, femur, torso length, etc., then you're probably not going to be able to create that position no matter how hard you try. What we want to be able to try and do is allow people to control their mass over the foot. And this, if the spine bends to allow that to do that, we want that. But thoracic flexion regardless should be a thing. So if I'm sitting extended and coming down into this, I'm trying to arch my back to keep myself tall and upright. As I'm coming down, I'm actually shifting my ribcage forwards, shifts my weight forwards. What we want is the opposite to that. So still sit upright, but flex the spine, because that's going to allow you to keep the weight into the heel. It pulls the shin back initially, which means you've got more range to actually shift forwards with as you go down into the bottom, but it also allows you to create better hip flexion because the hips are going to be slightly tucked under, which is going to allow that femur to lift up higher to sit the hips deeper to get your position. So if you're struggling with lifting that toe up all the time, think about creating flexion. Think about sitting upright with flexion, with the hip tucked underneath, and then from there, being able to control yourself down into that bottom position. That's going to make a big difference to just keep that weight backwards and start to understand that position. Now, if you've got the opposite problem where your weight's always falling backwards, your issue there is that you're not actually getting enough weight forwards, the exact opposite problem. And this is where we want to be thinking about creating the opposite. And this is where we want to be thinking about utilizing dorsiflexion. So, dorsiflexion is the ability of the knee and the ankle to allow the knee to travel forwards. Now, to create the best dorsiflexion, we need to create pronation, or pressure through the inside of the foot, and internal rotation of the hip, not knees out. Knees out is actually external rotation. You're going to wind up impinging on the outside of your hip socket. But also, that creates supination, and that's where you're going to have a reduced range. So, if I put excessive amount of pressure through the outside of my ankle there, and then roll forwards, that's about as far as I get. I feel quite tight through the front of that ankle, and you see my heel starting to lift there, and my knee is really only just about in line with my toe. If I pronate and internally rotate, and then I push my ankle forwards, I've just gained like a good, almost 5-10 centimeters worth of range of motion just by pronating, pushing that ankle forwards. My knee is still over the top of my foot. I'm still aligned. I'm still creating that alignment there. But I've got significantly more range of motion because my foot has allowed me to flatten, allowed me to dorsiflex, and allow my knee to travel further forwards. What that's going to allow me to do, it means that now I can travel downwards with the hip and not fall backwards. And again, center of mass management on top of that. So if I create pronation, roll myself forwards, and then from there I create a bigger weight forwards in terms of hinging into that position, it's going to allow me to sit into that bottom position and drive out of that quite comfortably. So think about, when you're thinking about doing a pistol, you want to be thinking about creating stacking. And depending on where your issues are, that's what's going to allow you to happen. So for the pistol itself, what you want to be thinking about, start with pressure on the outside of the foot. That's going to push the shin back. Start with the knee locked. Start with the hip locked. Start with flexion in your upper back and think about creating a hinge. From there, I'm going to deliberately create a little bit of a hinge. This just puts my rib cage directly above my foot and keeps my shin back early, which is where a lot of people go wrong. From there, if I allow myself to then sit downwards, allow me to put pressure through the inside of the foot to pronate, it's going to allow me to control my weight down, to sit down to that bottom of the rep, and then drive myself back out. Now, what I'm thinking about as I'm creating that shape is I'm thinking about creating an upwards lift, and I'm thinking about maintaining neutrality through the hip. I'm not thinking about trying to twist and do that. And a really easy way of doing that is controlling what the other leg is doing. What a neutral hip's going to do is it's going to maintain balance over the top of the mass. Because when I shift over onto this leg, my weight's going to shift slightly so that leg is directly underneath the center of my body. If I maintain a level pelvis as I do that, it's going to stop me from impinging and shifting out my hip out to the side. But on top of that, it's also going to allow me to keep some tension through my glute which is going to allow me to obviously pistol and create the lift that I'm looking for and stabilize the knee and stop this from happening. Because when I say pronate, I'm not trying to sit and then drop. I'm trying to control the ankle in, but keep my alignment there. So all the same actions, if we're talking about from front on now, all the same things that I just said. Lock out, pressure on the outside of the foot, lock the knee, lock the hip. In this case, I'm going to elevate so that you can see what's happening from front on. I'm still going to create my flexion. From there, I'm going to deliberately try and think about coming down. I'm going to create a little bit of pronation to let myself have more range of motion so I can keep my knee forwards. My knee and my foot, my knee and my hip are going to stay aligned. Still keeping that flexion. From there, I'm going to allow myself to come down to the bottom and then drive up. And I'm thinking about elevating that hip. I'm thinking about keeping that hip in line, left to right, so I'm not letting my knee come across, which you'll see with some people, because again, if that knee comes across, you're going to have to supinate. Reduces ankle range of motion. Or let my leg come out, because that's going to create over-pronation, but it's also going to create a collapsing through that side and push the hip out wide. So yes, it will allow you to keep balance over the foot, but it's not going to allow you to create good mechanics through the hips and the knees and the ankles. So that's the movements that we want to be thinking about, that we want to be cueing. So we'll go through the progressions now. So really simple things to begin with pistols is obviously going down to a target. So pistoling to a bench or a wall ball or something like that can be a good way of just getting people to understand the position and build it up. From there though, we want to train a full range of motion without having that sort of impingement, that stopping action there to move. And this is where using bands is a great tool to use. So band in the rig, set it up so it's about your glute crease. Obviously you can put it lower if you need less assistance. From there, I'm going to be deliberately going down into my pistol. I'm going to start using my left foot now just to switch things up a little bit. I'm still thinking about creating pressure to the outside of the foot, locking the knee, locking the hip, elevating, keeping it square, flexion through the upper back. I'm going to hinge into that slightly. From there, I'm going to all the way down to the bottom of my pistol and drive all the way out. Now there's a little bit of kick out on my knee there. That's because I unbalanced myself a little bit with the band. If I come down again, lock that knee as well. Everything stays the same. All the way down, all the way back up. So that's a really simple drill to use to teach the pistol. The next progression along from that is a band in the rig. Obviously normally I'd set it up on a pull-up bar, but we're using the yoke today. So if I go into that same action, now this is going to give me less stability through the hip, but it's going to allow me to pull myself forward. So the further I stand backwards, the more that this band's going to pull me forward and pull my weight forward and allow me to get that sensation of action. So people who are beginners, stand further back and hold on to the band at a tension point that gives you the right assistance. Obviously less help down low, more help up high to create that action. So if I'm sitting slightly further back to pull me forwards, from there I'm going to sit down into that movement. I'm just going to step forward so I don't hit the wall. Flex, start locked out, I'm going to hinge into that movement. I'm going to squat down, all the way down to the bottom and drive my way all the way back to the top. Generally from a balance standpoint, you want to be utilizing the opposite hand to the leg, just so that it creates a bit of cross stability, but that also pulls you forwards. People who hold on to the same side quite often will open rather than staying nice and central. So that's drill number 2. After that, we start playing with a few different variations. So next one that I like to play around with to get people familiar with the bottom position is moving into a rolling pistol. A rolling pistol can be quite useful for creating momentum forwards and familiarizing someone with the bottom position. Because you notice how a lot of these drills, they start at the top, travel down, and back out again. It means that you spend not much time in the bottom position. Whereas a rolling pistol, because you're rolling into that, you're throwing your weight forward, you can get quite good at being able to drive your foot into the ground. It starts to familiarize yourself with positions that are deeper than normal to then drive yourself out of. It also obviously gives you a little bit of momentum to shift yourself up and out of that position. So, rolling pistol, what we're looking for, obviously make sure you get a little bit of space behind you. From there, you want to be thinking about stepping yourself down and then rolling back. From there, I'm going to stamp my feet into the ground close to my body, Being close to my body allows me to then shift my weight forwards, and you want to just get that feeling for first of just getting up into the action. From there, you want to get to being able to hold that pistol point, and then from there, you can obviously pistol all the way out. So all I'm doing there is maintaining all the cues that we thought about earlier. This was really good at reinforcing a flex position because you can't roll when you're extended. So flex position through the spine, it reinforces get the weight forwards, and it reinforces that bottom position to be able to lift that leg up on the non-working leg, as well as driving the heel into the ground and building that understanding of what the heel is meant to do at the bottom of the rep. So really think about those cues, and then from there, everything stays the same. You're elevated, your hip is square, so make sure you're not rolling out anywhere with your leg, and then from there, obviously just pushing straight into the ground. So that's your rolling pistol. After that, we want to be thinking about creating, moving to the next level. Now this is where people pretty much have body weight pistols almost there, but they just need a little bit of help. Obviously, with the rolling pistol, you can also use a counterbalance. I'll just say that quickly. Holding a 5 kilo plate, something like that, just to shift the weight a little bit further forwards, can make that a little bit easier. Now, if you got people who struggle with just lifting the leg and nothing else, doing pistols on an elevated surface means that they just have a little bit more space for that foot to be able to have room to not impact the ground before driving back up. It means that they can just work on controlling that, controlling that leg, and creating, work on controlling that leg and being able to focus on the positions of the pistol itself without having to worry about this leg so much. But it also means that they can actually build that strength and build that capacity in that leg itself. Next, we're going to be working into, obviously you can increase the height of that as much as you need to, even to the point of literally doing a pistol on a box. That way they don't have to worry about the leg at all, which can be quite useful for just simply building understanding of being able to travel up and down without having to shift their weight of the other leg entirely. Final couple of steps that we can move into is a heel lift. So obviously a heel lift, and again you can use excessive heel lifts if you really need to work on particular angles, but a heel lift, whether you're using lifting shoes or a plate or whatever else, or ramps are ideal, honestly. Actually lifting shoes and ramps are perfect. But if we're using the heel lift, what that allows you to do is to really work on getting that knee forwards and allow you to understand where your center of mass is being positioned over your body. So it allows you to really just work on getting into deep, we'll switch over to left side again, getting into deep hip flex positions and knee flex positions, as well as maintaining that balance to then drive yourself out of it. So it just allows you to work on controlling the bottom position, controlling the shape, to build into that. Still thinking about all the same cues, starting in that lockout position, and believe me, the lockout shape really, really does make a huge difference when we're talking about the positions that you can actually hold and maintain when you're doing the pistol itself. Now, from the final portion, obviously the heel lift, it can make it a lot easier in a lot of people. Counterbalance is the final one, because again, it just allows you to shift that weight that little bit further forwards. So, if we think about all of our cues and tying those pieces together, weight is on the outside of the foot, supinated. From there, knee is locked out. From there, hip is locked out. You are flexed through your spine. From there, lifting the other leg up, centering your mass. From there, what I'm going to be trying to do is I'm going to allow myself to pronate a little bit. I'm hinging, pronating, sitting down to the bottom of my rep, and then from there, driving myself up and out. And obviously being able to do that on both legs is what we're really looking for. And the final stage to that is obviously doing the entire pistol completely unassisted on both legs. A little bit wobbly on that left side. So, what we're looking for is all those pieces and tying them together. You want to use the variation that is relevant to you and your skill level. but just think about hitting all the same positions in all of them. And remember, center your mass. It's a big cue that we want to be thinking about for today. Okay guys, hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, click us a message. Other than that, see you later.